Okay, welcome back, everybody. After our first two courses, one on the introduction to the Oral Torah, right? The introduction to the Mishnah and how it developed. And then we had another introductory course on Maimonides' fundamental principles of faith. Now we're going to have another introductory course to Masechet Avot, to the Tractate of Avot, of the ethics of our fathers. This is an introduction written by Maimonides to Masechet Avot, also known as the Shemona Perakim, the 8 chapters. That's commonly referred to as the 8 chapters because it's 8 chapters. And the point of his introduction is to explain how the nefesh works. What is the nefesh and how it works? Avot is all about our ethics, the ethics of the Hachamim, what they want to pass on to us. The whole point of the mitzvot, all of the mitzvot that we receive, is in order to correct our nefesh, to perfect ourselves as human beings, and be ethical people. So, the Mishnah, which covers all the mitzvot, all the Torah shebe'al peh, the oral Torah, and the details of how to behave, all come in order to teach us how to be a better person. And that is the objective of Avot. And Maimonides' introduction to Avot comes to teach us how this affects the nefesh. If anyone remembers, I brought this allegory of what the nefesh is. The nefesh is like the programming of the human body. So the nefesh consists of different functions, different functionalities. The first part is hazan. It takes care of our metabolism. Everything we eat, what gets thrown away, what gets turned into energy, all these background processes that our body does without us even noticing. Part of it has to do with our imagination and creativity. Part of the nefesh, there's another function of the nefesh, has to do with our intellect. So Maimonides in the Hagdama to Avot is going to teach us about the nefesh and basically give us the baseline, the grounding of how to be doctors of the nefesh, how to heal our nefesh, how to prevent it from getting sick. What does that mean? A sick or a healthy nefesh. All right? And so that's going to be the objective of this course, the entire Shemona Perakim. Today, we are going to learn the introduction to the Shemona Perakim, which is an introduction to Avot. So it's another introduction to an introduction. All right? So let's get started. Any questions so far? No? Okay, everyone could see the text, right? Excellent. So Shemona Perakim, the introduction, Hakdama. הנה בארנו בפתיחת זה החיבור. מה הייתה הסיבה בסום המחבר זאת המסכתה בסדר הזה? This is already at the beginning of our big essay, our book. What book is he talking about? He's talking about, this is part of his commentary to the Mishnah. So he says, at the beginning of my commentary to the Mishnah, which we studied part of it in our first course, Introduction to the Oral Torah, the introduction to the Mishnah, I already explained over there why Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi decided to put Masechet Avot where he decided to put it, at the end of Sefer Nezikin. All right, there's 6 zdarim to the Mishnah, Zmani, Moed, Nashim, Nezikin, and Taharot. Says, why did he put it here at the end of Nezikin? Well, we didn't actually read that passage. We'll get to that soon. V'zacharnu, and we also explained גם כן רוב התועלת בזאת המסכתה. And we explain over there how beneficial this מסכת is. ויעדנו פעמים רבות במה שקדם מזה החיבור לדבר בזאת המסכתה בעניינים מועילים. He says, and I already promised also many times throughout my commentary in the Mishnah that when we get to Masechet Avot, I'm going to expand on many very beneficial ideas. ולהאריך בה קצת אריכות. And I'm going to take my time. I'm going to explain in depth. מפני שהיא אף על פי שתראה מבוארת, קלה להבין, לעשות מה שבכללה אינו קל על כל בני אדם. It says, even though when reading Masechet Avot, it's not complicated halachot, right? It says, הוו מתונים בדין, right? Be patient in judgment, העמידו תלמידים הרבה, have many students, ועשו סייג לתורה, and make sure you make boundaries to not overpass the Torah. All right, so it's simple to understand. He says, however, executing or incorporating these practices into your life isn't so simple. It's very easy to understand, right? The peshat of what the Chachamim are saying. However, turning it into practice is a lot more difficult. ואין כל עניינה גם כן מובנים מבלי פירוש ארוך עם היותו מביאה אל שלמות גדול והצלחה אמיתית. And even so, a lot of Masechet Avot is very easy to understand. There are some things that really need to be properly discussed and explained. Because after all, Masechet Avot is maybe one of the more important objectives of the Torah to teach you proper ethics. ומפני זה, and because of this, ראיתי להרחיב בה המעמד. And because of all this, I want to expand over here. And he wrote an 8-chapter introduction plus his commentary to Avot. וכבר אמרו ז"ל, and the Chachamim already said, היימן דבעי למהווה חסידה. Right, this is a phrase in Aramaic. It says, what is the way to becoming a Hasid? Nikayem mile de Avot. Right, perform the words of Avot, Masechet Avot. ואין אצלנו מעלה גדולה מחסידות, אלא הנבואה. The Chachamim say, if you want to become a Hasid, the way to do that is to practice the words of Avot. And the Bible is telling us that there is no higher level than a Hasid other than a Navi. So short of becoming a Navi, the highest level man can attain is becoming a Hasid. And we will understand what that means. I think in the 6th or 7th chapter of the Shemona Perakim, he discusses what is the meaning of Hasid. So if you want to get to the highest level attainable by man, short of Nevuah, says then you have to study Masechet Avot. And you have to incorporate it in your life. Vehi hameviah eleha. Right? So the higher level above Hasid is Navi, a prophet. It says Hasidut leads to prophecy. כמו שאמרו חסידות מביאה לידי רוח הקודש. Right, practicing Avot makes you a Hasid. Right, living like a Hasid brings you to Ruach HaKodesh and can bring you to Nevuah. הנה התבאר מדבריהם שעשות מוסרי זאת המסכתה מביאה לידי נבואה. Says, so the Chachamim are telling you, practice the words of Avot, and that is going to bring you, that is the way, the pathway to becoming a Navi. והנה והנני עתיד לבאר אמיתת הדבר ההוא, מפני שהיא כוללת על חלק גדול מהמידות. And I'm going throughout the Shemona Perakim, Rambam is saying, I'm going to explain how true this is, what Masechet Avot does to our nefesh, and how it corrects our nefesh, preparing it to receive Ruach HaKodesh, communication with God. All right, so let's see what the Rambam said at the beginning of the Mishnah, right? So here in his entire, he has like a 30-page introduction to the Mishnah itself. We brought parts of it in our first course on the introduction to the Oral Torah. And so towards the end, he talks about the structure of the Mishnah. Why did the Rabbi Yehuda start with Masechet Zira'im? And then he went on to Moed, right? And here, Masechet Avot is at the end of Nezikin. All right, so it says, V'achar kach, חלק המאמר בנזיקין, וחלק המסכת הראשונה לשלושה חלקים, והתחיל בבקמה, ועניינה לדבר על נזיקין, כגון שור, ובור, והבער, ודין החובל. All right, so after discussing Zira'im, all the mitzvot that have to do with the land, Eretz Israel, Terumot and Ma'asrot, he went on to Moed, discussing Shabbat and Eruvin and Yom Tov, right? Then he went on to Nashim, discussing things to do with marriage and divorce, right? And then eventually got to Nezikin. Nezikin starts the beginning of Seder Nezikin starts with, well, there's the, how do you call it? The shor, the bor, the four main types of property damage that a person can cause, right? And most disputes between people are settled or the laws of which are taught in Seder Nezikin. All right, and after discussing with Baba Mesiah, Baba Kama, Baba Batra, he says, so the first Masechet dealing with all of these disputes between people, it's so big, he divided into three Masechtot. Baba means gateway or doorway. So the Sha'ar Yishon, like the first part of Nezikin is Baba Kama, the first one. And then there's Baba Mesiah, the middle one. And then there's Baba Batra, the last one. And then he moved on to things that have to do with the Sanhedrin and what the authorities they have, how they punish. And towards the end of that, right, right, what are the authorities of the Dayan, right, the judge? He started with Masechet Avot ve'asa ze lishne inyanim, right? He fit Masechet Avot here in Nezikin for two reasons. One, ha'ehad lehodia she'askama ve'akabbala emet ve'nechona ve'kibelu ha'am me'am ולפיכך ראוי לכבד החכמים מהם ולשיבו במעלה נכבדת. All right, so first is he wanted to address the Masoret that the Chachamim received, one Beit Din from the other, one generation from the other. Right? And Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, he establishes that in the first Mishnah in Avot. Torah, Moshe kibel Torah misinai, umsaraha liYehoshua, v'Yehoshua lizkenim, u'zkenim linvi'im. Right, so he passed on from one era to another, one generation to another. So first of all, to establish the Masoret that the Chachamim received, one generation from the other. And as receivers of this Masoret, as the links that we have to Har Sinai, to Moshe Rabbeinu, we should hold these Chachamim in high esteem. ולהושיבו במעלה נכבדת בשביל שהגיע ההוראה אליו, right? Because the teachings of Moshe, which passed down from generation to generation, reached these Hakamim who are now our Dayanim. ושהוא בדורו כמו אלו בדורם. And he, right, in his generation, this Dayan is like all the previous Hachamim in their generation. Ken Amru. And this is what the Hachamim said. אם באנו לדון אחר בית דינו של רבן גמליאל, right, if we're going to now investigate the Beit Din of Rabban Gamliel, who was the Nasi, the president of the Beit Din, right, in the times, in the era prior to the Horban, right, אמרו שמשון בדורו כאהרון בדורו, יפתח בדורו כשמואל בדורו, right, it says we're going to have to investigate all of the Batei Din that existed from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabban Gamliel. Says you can't say, oh, well, Rabban Gamliel wasn't as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, or he wasn't as great as Shemuel HaNavi, right? No, it says you have to go according to the Shofet, the Dayan, the Beit Din that you have in your generation. ובעניין זה יש מוסר גדול לבני אדם, right? And this itself is a great lesson. שלא יאמרו מדוע נקבל משפט פלוני או תקנת דיין פלוני. Says, why should we accept the verdict of this Hacham, of this Dayan, or takana? Remember, the Hachamim, they have the authority to legislate certain takanot, to legislate certain gezerot, things to prevent us from transgressing the Torah. It says, ve'en hadavar ken, right? This, you shouldn't think this way. Shehamishpat eno lifnoni hashofet, right? Because the judgment isn't per a specific judge. Ela lakadosh baruch hu. But for God, He's making judgment on behalf of God. Shesiva otanu. God commanded us and said, Ki hamishpat leElohim hu. He says judgment is to God. It's in God's realm. Because the judgment that the Dayan is passing is based on a Masoret that he received generation from generation, all the way to Moshe, who received the laws from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Aval hakol mishpat ehad. Right? It's not the Dayan who's passing judgment, it's the Dayan who's informing you what the laws are. And it's all, whether it's a Rabban Gamliel, or Yiftach, or Shemuel, or a modern day Dayan, Hakol Mishpat Ehad, it's all one judgment. V'kibeluhu ish mipi ish, al hadorot ha'holfin. It's just, these laws were passed down one generation to the other. But they were all received from one place. V'ha'inyan ha'sheni, right? So we said there's two main reasons why the Biuda HaNasi put Masechet Avot here. It says, so the second one is Shehu Ratzah Liskor b'Masechet Zu Musar Kol Chacham Min HaChachamim Aleihem HaShalom. Says he also wanted to show us the ethics of the Chachamim, or the ethics, the lessons that each one of these Nesi'im had to teach us as our Dayanim, as our judges, and as our, say, our presidents. This way we can learn from their ethics, their proper midot, how to behave. Right? However, us regular people, right, we don't need it as badly as the Dayanim themselves. So first of all, he also wants to establish here the ethics of the Dayanim, how each one of them has a profound ethical lesson to teach us. And if they have a profound ethical lesson to teach us, it means that they themselves have profound ethics that they are able to teach us. And this is very important, that the Dayanim themselves are ethical people. And this is what the Biuda HaNasi wants to demonstrate. that these Hachamim, all the Tanaim mentioned in the Mishnah, who are teaching us our laws, they were ethical people. Right? She'ameh haaretz, right? So the regular people, שלא יהיו בעלי מוסר, אין ההיזק לכל ההמון, אלא לבעליו בלבד. Right? Because regular people, simple people, going around their regular lives, some are more ethical than others, some are less. If they don't have a high standard of ethics, it's not as damaging to the public as if the Dayanim don't have proper ethics, because the Dayanim aren't just judges, they're also legislators. All right, they have power over the people, they have power over the nation. So it's very important for the Biuda Hanasi to demonstrate that these people were ethical people, proper behavior, and they have what to teach us on the topic. אבל השופט, however, the judge, שלא יהיה בעל מוסר ושנוא, if he is not ethical and he's not humble, יזיק עצמו ויזיק לבני אדם. He will also damage himself like anybody else. ויזיק לבני אדם, he will make unjust judgments, he will make wrongful legislation, he can cause a lot of damage. לפיכך, therefore, היה תחילת דבריו במסכת אבות, מוסר הדיינים, כמו שאמר, הבו מתונים בדין. Right, so that's why he started off Avot with the musar directed specifically to the dayanim themselves. Right, when Masechet Avot starts off and says, he said three things, הבו מתונים בדין, right, be patient in judgment. Have many students. Who is he talking to? There's a Shimon HaTzadik passing his ethical lessons. Says be patient in judgment. He's not talking to me and you. He's talking to the judges. It's his instruction to the judges when you're sitting in judgment. First of all, be patient. Don't be hasty. Don't jump to conclusions. Listen to both sides. Listen very carefully. Be patient in judgment. Right? And every dayan, anybody coming to judge the public or to judge a dispute, needs to follow the instructions of Masechet Avot. Kegon sheyeh matun badin, right? It should be patient and not hasty. Vani maher pesak din, shouldn't be hasty to pass a verdict. She'efshar sheyeh bedin ahu inyan nistar, because it could be that there is something that the shofet needs to dig up and uncover. It's not being just told on the surface by the two people giving a dispute. It's the judge's responsibility to understand what's really going on and uncover that and then pass judgment. And that requires patience and proper interrogation of the two sides. Moshe amru alehem shalom din merumeh, right? That this is like a mistrial because the judge missed something. However, he too should not delay the deen, take too much time. Once he's realized that there is nothing uncovered, he's really covered all the bases. Right? This is called torturing the deen, making it take a very long time. We know today the court system in Israel, you come for a small dispute, and it could take a year or 2 years before you actually get anything done, anything progresses in the Beit Din. That's called the Inui Hadin. People come for a dispute, they want it settled as soon as possible. Right? Don't be hasty and jump to conclusions right away, but don't prolong the deen more than it needs. Right? He needs to make sure to interrogate the witnesses ולהיזהר בשעת החקירה שלא ילמדו העדים את דבריו מה שיסיים על עניינם. Right? And he needs to be careful that when interrogating the witnesses, he doesn't reveal anything that will help them figure out like what is he looking for, so that they can kind of like you shouldn't interrogate them in a way that will kind of like put words in their mouth. So to help them pass better arguments. Right? And he shouldn't also kind of like show them what they should be saying or not saying. And this is called, preparing the dayanim, like setting them up. So all this comes at the end of Seder Nezikin. Seder Nezikin is one of the bigger masechtot that deals with property disputes. And we said earlier in the Hagdama here, he says, right? Who wants to become a Hasid? What is the way, the pathway to becoming a Hasid? Right? To follow the instructions of Avot. There is another version of this statement. It says, who wants to become a Hasid? What is the proper way? Meaning all of Seder Nezikin. And what the Rambam is telling us, that the highest level that you can achieve as human perfection before Nevuah, before receiving Ruach HaKodesh, is a Hasid. Says you do this through following the instructions of Masechet Avot. Right? The other version of the statement says, L'kayem mineh din zikin. Says the highest way to do that is to practice the words of Seder and Nezikin, which Avot is at the end of. So Avot is really, it's like the pinnacle. It's like the summary. It's the objective of all of Seder and Nezikin. And Seder and Nezikin is all about respecting another person's property, right? Being sure, that your ox doesn't roam free and cause damage to others. That if you make a fire, you control the area that it's burning and it doesn't damage someone else's property, right? We're not even talking here about keeping Shabbat or Kashrut. The Hachamim say the highest level you can reach is by ethics. And the parallel statement is ethics is basically respecting another person's property, respecting his belongings, not overstepping your boundary, not being not overtaking your neighbor's property, just respecting his property. You say, shilcha, shilcha, shini shilcha. And these are the ethics of the Hachamim, the highest level that you can achieve. And then he continues, ואל יחלל נפשו בחברת עמי הארץ שמי ילבוז, ואל יתעלם מבני אדם עד שלא יוכל לראותו בכל עת שיצטרכו אליו. Says he shouldn't also be the Hacham. He should, conduct himself with dignity and not like, let's say, frequent bars where all the people are all the time. He should kind of like elevate himself, but also he shouldn't detach himself from the public. He shouldn't be hard to get to. Shemei Yovad ha'evyon, right? This way, the more simple people, the poor people, won't get lost because they have no way of accessing the dayan. ואל יבקש מנוחה ותענוגים פן יאבד האמת ולא תימשכהו התאווה. Right? And he also shouldn't be, going also after all the ta'anugim, eating a lot, drinking a lot. ואל יהי רוצה להתקדם אל חבריו לדין. Right? And he shouldn't always be pushing to be the dayan. ואל ילחץ עצמו להיכנס בדיינות שמא יהיה חשוד. Right, so you shouldn't always be running away from Deen. If people are coming and say, "We want Deen," he says, "Yes, you should come, I'll sit down, I'll hear your arguments, but he shouldn't always be pushing himself into, oh, you have a dispute, come to me, I want to solve your dispute. וצריך להיות מהדר בכל דיניו אחר הפשרה. Says in the Dayan, when he's hearing the dispute, his primary objective should always be to reach some sort of agreement between the two parties. It says first be a mediator, and if that doesn't work, then you be a judge. ואם יוכל שלא יפסוק דין בכל ימיו, אבל שיעשה פשרה בין שני המריבים, הנה מה טוב ומנעים. Says, and if he passes his entire career not passing judgment once, but bringing the two parties to some sort of agreement or consensus, says this is the best. Says don't pass judgment unless you absolutely have to. But if you can't, אז יחתוך הדין, then you should pass a verdict. All right, if you remember our first course, the entire basis of the Torah shebe'al peh was based on consensus, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't force us to accept the Torah. He proposed the Torah to us, and we accepted it willingly and freely. And that's why we are obligated to keep our end of the covenant. Not only that, but all of legislation, all new legislation that comes after that, needs to be accepted by the public. So too, when two people come to Deen, to be judged, first try to reach an agreement between the two parties. That's the highest level of legislation. That's the highest level of passing judgment. ואל יטריח, אבל ייתן זמנים ארוכים לבעל הריב, והניחהו לבקש על נפשו כל היום. ואף על פי שילבד דברים וידבר הוללות וסכלות. He says, and he shouldn't prevent people that are coming to present their argument. He should not hurry them. He should let them make their statement, even though, they're not good speakers, they're not eloquent speakers, maybe they're mixing things up, maybe they're morons, and let them speak, let them say their whole argument. And if you can't, because it's just going on and he's not adding anything new, and you don't want to make this inui din, right? If they've all made their statements and they're just repeating the same thing over and over, then you pass a verdict. You see, when the Hachamim, they see that one side is just trying to prolong the discussion, maybe time is working in his favor, and he's just trying to waste time, then they put all sorts of punishments on him in order to hurry him up, like tying his hands, all right? אבל דרך כלל, right, but generally speaking, צריך שיהיה השופט כרופא בקיא. A dayan, a judge, needs to be like a doctor. שכל זמן שיוכל לרפא במזונות, ולא ירפא ברפואות. At any time that a doctor sees a patient and he's able to cure him with prescribing maybe certain fruits and vegetables, certain foods, says then he shouldn't prescribe him medicine. However, if he's very sick, right, and just changing his diet isn't going to cure him, then he'll give him mild medicines, things that are close to food, right? Like light medication, we call it medication that doesn't need prescriptions. If he sees that it's a very bad sickness that he has, and the Tylenols and that you're going to get at the pharmacy without a prescription aren't good enough, ואלו הדברים אינם מכניעים אותו ואינם כנגדו, יחזור לרפות ברפואות חזקות. And he should use more harsher medicines, heavier medicines. וישכנו רפואה משלשלת, and he's giving all sorts of different types of medicines that were known in his time. וכדומה לו מהרפואות המרות והרעות. So too the shofet, the dayan coming, ישתדל לעשות פשרה. He should always try to bring the two parties to an agreement. ואם אינו יכול, ישפוט בנחת וירסה לבעל הריב בדברך. And if he can't bring them to an agreement, then he should still judge them lightly, speak to them nicely, right? Try to bring them to an agreement, try to explain the different sides to each side. And if he can't do that, because one of them is cruel, one of them is a rasha, one of them just wants to abuse the other, right? And in that case, the dayan should be stern, he should be strong, and he should use whatever means necessary. וצריך לשופט שלא ילבה לדוף אחרי תענוגי העולם ואהבת העושר והמעלה, כמו שאמר הכתוב, שונאי ועשה. Right? And the shofet too shouldn't be someone who's always looking for power, looking for honor, looking for money. You have to be Sunei Vasa, people that hate, what's it called? What's the word? Shohad. I forgot the word in English. Hate bribery. ואמרו עליהם השלום, החכמים said, מלך במשפט יעמיד ארץ, says a king in his decisions, in his judgment, יעמיד ארץ, he will hold the earth or the land together. What does that mean? It says, right? If the judge resembles a king, because the king doesn't need anything from anybody. The king has everything, right? So you can't bribe him. If the dayan acts in a way that he doesn't need honor, he doesn't need money, he doesn't need power, that kind of dayan is ya'amid eres, right? He was going to hold the land together, hold society together. However, if his behavior is like he brings like a kohen who lives off people's contributions and donations, then when he comes to pass judgment, he's going to be looking for, who's going to give him, what's he going to get out of it? Who's he going to benefit more from? ואחר שנראה שהשופט צריך לכל אלו המוסרים כדי להוסר בהם, אם כן, מה נחמד ונכון היה תיקון מסכת אבות אחרי מסכת סנהדרין. Says, and because the primary objective of Avot is to teach these ethics to the Danyanim themselves, and then also to us, says, this is why Masechet Avot comes kind of like as a conclusion to Seder Nezikin, right after Masechet Sanhedrin. ומה שנלווה אליו, לפי שהיא כוללת אלה המוסרים, because it includes all of these ethics. ועוד נוסף עליהם עניינים אחרים, מביאים לידי פרישות מן העולם, and also many more ethics that teach us not to be a little bit less materialistic. וכבוד העולם ובעליה ומעשה היושר והיראה, teach us the proper ways of behavior, of being straight, being honest, being God-fearing. וכאשר השלים מוסר הדיינים, החל לבאר שגיאותיהם. This is already moving on from Masechet Avot to Masechet Horayot. The next Masechet says, after talking about the ethics of the Dayanim, he moved on to Masechet Horayot, which deals with the mistakes of the Beit Din, of the courts. Right? Why? כל מי שיש בו טבע בשר ודם, אי אפשר שלא יטעה ויחטא. Says, as ethical as you are, as long as you're human, you're going to make mistakes. This is also an important lesson for us to learn. Even the greatest of the Hachamim, even the entire Sanhedrin can make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, they're to be held accountable. ולפיכך סידר הוריות אחר אבות, ובא חתם סדר נזיקים. Right, and that's why he brought Seder Horayot, dealing with the mistakes that the courts can make right after Masechet Avot. Says Masechet Avot is teaching us how to be as perfect human beings as possible. Horayot is telling us, as perfect a human being as you are, you're still going to make mistakes. And that's the end of Seder Nezikin, dealing with the disputes between two parties, because disputes between two parties many times is due to misunderstanding between people, is due to one person making a mistake. It says, even if you're perfect, you're still likely to make mistakes. And this is a musar for the Dayan. So even you can make a mistake. Hevu mitunin badin, right? Don't haste the deen. Don't be quick to pass judgment. Take your time, understand the different sides of the dispute, and pass judgment justly and rightfully. And now we'll move back to the Shemona Perakim, right? We took a little detour, went from the introduction to Avot to the introduction to the Mishnah, dealing with the placement of Avot. Let's see. Veda, right? Okay. Veraiti להקדים קודם. Says, but before I start explaining, bringing the commentary to each halacha of Masechet Avot, שאתחיל בפירוש הלכה, פרקים מועילים. There's a few chapters I have here that I prepared, right? The Shemona Perakim. ידע מהם האדם הקדמות, right? As introductory to מסכת אבות. ויהיו גם כן כמפתח למה שאני עתיד לפרש, right? And this is like a key. It's like a tool set. I'm giving you tools here to understand the nefesh, which Masechet Avot comes to teach you to perfect. ודע שהדברים שאומרם באלו הפרקים, במה שיבוא מן הפירוש, אינם עניינים בדיתים אני מעצמי. Says you should know what I'm going to be explaining to you in these 8 chapters are not things that I, from my own understanding. These aren't things that I made up. ולא פירשתים, ולא פירושים שחידשתים, and these aren't commentaries that are necessarily my חידושים. ואומנם הם עניינים לקטים מדברי החכמים במדרשות ובתלמוד וזולתם מחיבוריהם. Says some of the things are ideas and חידושים that I collected from the Hachamim, spread out all over the Talmud and the Midrashim, and any other writings that they may have written, and also מדברי הפילוסופים גם כן, הקידומים והחדשים. And I'm also bringing in ideas that I learned from the philosophers. The philosophers then were the scientists. They were scientists. So it's like someone writing today a book on psychology and say, well, I'm incorporating into my book on psychology things that the Chachamim wrote in the Talmud, things that they wrote in Masechet Avot, things that they wrote in the Midrashim, and also I'm going to bring some Freudian psychology and some Jungian psychology, and I'm going to mix this all in and build you a nice outlook on how the nefesh works. These 8 chapters are going to incorporate into them all the science that was available to me, whether it comes from the Hachamim or whether it comes from the philosophers / scientists, psychologists of his time. And accept the truth from whoever said it, whether it was Aristotle or whether it was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. ואפשר שאביא פעמים מאמר אחד כולו מספר מפורסם בלשונו, ואין בכל זרוע. And so sometimes I'll bring an entire idea that was published in some a famous book, maybe of Al-Harizi, maybe of one of the great physicians of the past, Galinus. ואיני מתפעל במה שאמרו אדם שאני כבר התעודדתי בזה, ואף על פי שלא אזכור אמר פלוני, שזה אריכות אין בו תועלת, and I'm not going to state every person, every idea that I brought, where I'm quoting it from, right? Maybe I'm quoting Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, maybe I'm quoting Aristotle. It's not going to benefit you in any way if I tell you whose idea it was. ואפשר שאם מביא שם האיש ההוא לחשוב, מי שאין נוכח לו שהדבר ההוא נפסד ובתוכו רע, שלא יבינהו. ומפני זה ראיתי שלא לזכור האומר. So I'm telling you now, I'm bringing things from all of these people. I'm not going to state who it is. Why? Because, I don't know, you don't like Aristotle. So I'm going to bring something from that Aristotle said, and you're just going to dismiss it. So I don't want you to dismiss it, because I put a lot of effort into sifting through the words of all the scientists and philosophers and physicians at the time, and to pick out the right ideas. And if I mention that this came from someone that you don't like his philosophy in general, it may cause you to dismiss it. Says, no, I put together a broad picture for you over here of how the nefesh works. Some of it comes from the Chachamim, some of it comes from the scientists, and I don't want you to dismiss something just because it came from the wrong person according to your perception. And therefore I'm not gonna mention who said what. שכוונתי התועלת לקורא ולבאר לו העניינים הגנוזים בזאת המסכתה. The whole point of all of this is in order to give you an introduction to the nefesh so that you can understand the inner workings of this מסכת, מסכת אבות. ואני מתחיל עתה לזכור הפרקים אשר ראיתי להקדים, הנה זה לפי כוונתי, והם 8 פרקים. And therefore I'm going to start now actually writing the introduction. There's 8 chapters to this introduction. All right, and that's the end of the introduction to the introduction. And I think this is where we are going to end our class today. I'd be ashamed to start the first chapter and not be able to finish it. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if I could add here to hear the difference. Esther cited from whom she has heard. She cited Mordechai. So this was thought. They found it that it was very good. I don't know in this judgment process to say from which source you are speaking.
Oh, yes. Okay, it says, right. You're referring to when it says, Kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro mevi ge'ula la'olam. Anyone who mentions a statement in the name of the person who said it brings ge'ula, right, brings redemption to the world. You're referring to that statement. I'm assuming it's actually learned from Mordechai, Shtomar Esther b'shem Mordechai, that Esther spoke in the name of Mordechai, and because of that, eventually the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, right? He how do you call it? He listened to Mordechai and he trusted him, and that's what brought redemption to the Jewish people. So yes, whenever you it's a different kind of statement, though, right? Here, the objective of the Rambam is to teach you something, and he doesn't want you to dismiss something because you dislike the person. That statement is elevating the person that you're speaking in his name, right? You say, "Oh, this person said, he saved you." Oh, it wasn't me who told you this. It's this person, right? It's Mordechai. Mordechai is the one who told me the news about these two people trying to kill you, Bigtana V'Teresh, right? So when you're bringing a statement that's going to be acceptable to people, then yes, you should mention the person or the identity of the person who's behind it. However, if you're bringing a correct statement, we call it like an empirical statement, facts, and you know that if it's said in the name of someone specific, then it may be dismissed. Then you can avoid mentioning who it was. Sometimes it could be lashon hara to mention who said something, but just to bring his statement.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else? All right. If there's no more questions, then I guess we'll meet again next week.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Right, yes, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good
תודה
evening,
רבה.
everybody.
לילה טוב.
לילה טוב, ערב טוב, ערב טוב.
Thank you, Shami.
Recorded this class.
Oh, yes, this class is recorded, and so you can get it from Pnei Or. It also goes up on my YouTube channel.